Welcome to Search for Signs. My name is Gary Willing. If this information interests you, please press the like and subscribe button and press the bell for notifications.
Well. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, maybe even a good overnight. I don't know when you're listening to this, and I don't even know where you are, but I hope you're having a great day wherever you are. I happen to be recording this video on September the 17th, 2020. Here in very, very rainy Georgia is where I'm recording this. But anywho, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to at least listen to the video this far. If you've never been to this channel before, what we talk about here can be kind of controversial. And a lot of people will comment about how they don't like what I say at all. So I'm not trying to put a bad foot forward, but anyway, it's not everybody's cup of tea is my point, but I am always saying these things just for your consideration and your consideration only. But what we talk about here is Maitreya, the Masters of Wisdom, how it ties into current events, the political unrest, social unrest, of course, the economic divisions and religious divisions and so forth, how that ties into miracle signs like healing waters, crosses of light, UFO crop circles, even my own personal experiences with Maitreya and some of these masters and so forth, and try to tie it into, the hopeful message that it is. All right. So again, thank you for taking the time to listen to this video. If you've listened to these videos before, I want to thank you for coming back. Hopefully you've learned something from the last time from each video that you listened to. The best way to learn something is to ask a question. That's what my sixth grade teacher used to say. So if you have a question about Maitreya, the Masters of Wisdom, what we talk about here on this channel, you can always post your question as a comment or email me directly at searchforsigns@mail.com. And because I like to just fly off the handle and go off the cuff kind of thing, I would rather just do an audio response to your question versus typing it all out. So I usually do it in the next video, and you can listen to such a great, fine, and wonderful answer that I'll give you. All right. I do want to draw your attention to the background image on this video. Three things about this I find very interesting. Okay, so first of all, let me tell you what this is. This is actually a picture of a painting from a young artist named Akiane Kramarik, who painted this when she was in grade school. Now I think she's in her either late teens or early 20s. I don't know. She's an adult now, I guess a young adult. She's very religious, had kind of a difficult upbringing, started having visions of heaven, angels, and even of Jesus, started painting them, yada, 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 yada. Now, what also makes it interesting is there was a person who comments on my channel from time to time. She goes by the name Zen, who in the last video I put up commented in response to somebody else's comment and said, "The Prince of Peace, that's what Akiane Kramarik called her painting of Jesus." Now, what she doesn't know, and nobody knows except for me, is that video that she commented on about this painting, I was actually going to use this painting and talk about it in the way that I'm talking about it in this video. So I thought it was kind of funny. And I kind of mulled it over back and forth for a few hours, and in the end, I went with this really I thought it was kind of a funny meme, but you might think it's kind of cheesy, about the art of waiting. It really is what my purpose behind it was. Now, the reason why I was hesitant to talk about this painting and what we're going to talk about and tying it into this story is a couple reasons. One, Akiane doesn't know anything about this information, and if she did, she would not believe, I'm sure, any of it. And that's fine. This is, we're all in it together, but we might not see it the same way, I guess is my point. The other part was, and what really ties it into this story is Benjamin Creme, when he was alive, was asked about this particular painting, the subject in this painting and who the artist was and so forth. And I found his commentary on it to be quite provocative and interesting from knowing this information. But I also knew Benjamin Creme for years, and there was times when he would say things that were really only meant for the person who he was talking to or those kind of in the small group that were listening and that kind of thing. And he didn't want it getting out to the general public. So for months, I had thought about talking about this painting, didn't know whether it was appropriate for me to talk about it from Akiane Kramarik's perspective, not believing in this, also from what, not knowing whether Benjamin Creme's commentary on this painting was something that I should be talking about. So, a couple days ago, I had spoken with a friend of mine who collects all the Share International magazines, and she assured me that Benjamin Creme's commentary on this painting was published in Share International. So I figured if it was published in Share International for everybody to read, it's okay for me to talk about. So anyway, that's why I changed my mind. But I just thought it was kind of funny that this listener was commenting on this, not knowing that I was going to put this as the image in that of this painting in that video. I thought it was kind of funny. But so getting back to the story of this painting. All right, so Akiane Kramarik, when she was painting all these images of angels, of heaven and so forth, which are quite astounding. The color, the detail are amazing. She's a wonderful artist, very realistic. But when it came time for her to try to paint what she saw in a vision as Jesus, she was experiencing what is known as painter's block. Writers have it with writer's block, right? They have this idea, it's great, fine, and wonderful in their head, and every time they try to put it on canvas, it's not looking the way they want it to look. It can be quite frustrating. I know I'm a painter myself, and I'm not nearly as talented as she is, especially as realistic as she is, but there are times, even for me, that I have an idea in my head, and the color might not be working out, or the image in my mind is not working out, and sometimes it takes years for me to work it out to where it actually ends up kind of coming together. But for the artist, when this happens, it's like an itch you can't scratch, and it can be quite frustrating. So she was having a hard time trying to paint what was in her head about Jesus. She said a prayer to Jesus one night. She was very excited when she was telling the story because the very next day, an acquaintance friend of her family came by the door with a gentleman who ended up being the subject for this painting. And she said he was quite tall, I guess nearly 7 feet tall is what she said. So he was pretty big. But what also made it, quite serendipitous based on her prayer and wanting to do Jesus, was this guy happened to be a carpenter. So they come by the door. She sees him. That's who she wants as a subject of her painting for Jesus. She asks him, would you be willing to allow me to paint you as a subject for this painting? He said, sure. So he very quietly sat down, and from what I understand, for hours on end, she painted him for this painting. And then he came back the next day, did the same thing, and the next day. I don't know how many days he did it, but it was for several days. I don't know if it was until she completed the painting or got far enough along where she didn't need the subject anymore, and then she kind of just put the details in herself. But anyway, so this painting is quite famous, especially amongst the religious faithful, and it was even in a movie with Greg Kinnear called Heaven's for Real and that kind of thing, that's where I was introduced to this painting for the first time. I saw it years ago. I love the painting. Anyway, so Benjamin Creme was asked about this painting. What he said was the gentleman who was the carpenter who allowed himself to be painted for this painting was none other than the Master Jesus. And from what I understand, could be wrong, is this apparently is quite close to how the Master Jesus actually looks. Now, what you might not know, especially if you've never listened to any of my videos, the Masters are coming back into the world. They were once in the world for eons and ages, really. And then for the last 100,000 years or so, they've been living isolated away from most of humanity. And they've worked behind the scenes through their disciples in the world. Any man, woman, or other, I'm just kidding, who has made some kind of impact in society was, whether they knew it or not, one or other, a disciple of one or other of these masters. And we're going to talk about the history of Jesus here in a second, but the masters have used art to reintroduce themselves, or to at least help reintroduce themselves back to the general public. Maitreya did it through Rembrandt, and some of the other Renaissance painters were painting images of Jesus to help do that in their own way. Apparently, this Akiane Kramarik may or may not have realized it. I don't know. Probably more than likely doesn't realize it, but she is actually helping to reintroduce people to who and what the Master Jesus is through this painting. So anyway, now, of course, everybody knows who Jesus is. Everybody has their belief on who he is or was. And I'm going to read one of Benjamin Creme's Master's article, who talks about, in greater depth and a lot better than I can, about the Son of Man. But Jesus apparently had several incarnations in the Bible before he was Jesus. The first incarnation was Joseph, son of Nun, during the time of Moses, and then he was Joshua during the time of Ezra, and Jeshu, another Joshua, I think, or during another time of one of the books. Came into incarnation as Jesus, was a very, very, very advanced disciple, even now by today's standards, but back then it was just off the charts in terms of how advanced he was. But his job was to be the vehicle for the world teacher, who the world teacher for the age of Pisces was actually Maitreya, working through Jesus the way that all the disciples, or all the masters, worked to get their information out and their teachings out, or their political ideas out to the public for eons. It was this way, is they were in isolation, but they were working telepathically through a disciple in the world. Jesus just happened to be in Palestine at the time that he was in the incarnation. Maitreya was in the Himalayas, in a very, very, very remote area of the Himalayas, but was working telepathically through Jesus to speak to the people. Jesus, according to the Ageless Wisdom teachings, knew his relationship to Maitreya, knew who Maitreya was, knew about the masters, was teaching general teachings to the people about the laws of cause and effect, the laws of rebirth, those kind of things, how to live peacefully with one another, how to serve, how to grow, he was trying to wake people up, really, to the truth that there are souls. But historically, according to the Ageless Wisdom teachings, the majority of the teachings that are attributed to Jesus actually came from Maitreya. Now, I know this is controversial to a lot of people, and I'd probably just turn the video off after hearing that, but it's just a different way of, it's a different way of looking at it for now. But anyway, so Maitreya worked through Jesus 2,000 years ago in that way, between the baptism and the crucifixion. There was also times when Jesus was teaching the people, but for the most part it was Maitreya that was doing it. Some of the disciples knew, but most of the people and the disciples had no idea that Maitreya was speaking through Jesus. So when they wrote things down, they didn't write it down thinking that it was anybody other than the Holy Spirit speaking through Jesus. Anyway, now, according to the Ageless Wisdom teachings, Jesus did die on the cross, but not for the same reason that an evangelical Christian would think that he died on the cross for. He died on the cross, and just as it was written in the Bible, 3 days later, he rose from the dead. But it wasn't Jesus, it was Maitreya's consciousness entering the body of Jesus. When he did that on Easter, the first Easter, right, there was a tremendous amount of light that escaped Jesus's body, and it actually imprinted onto the shroud, which is now known as the Shroud of Turin. So according to the masters, that image in the Shroud of Turin that you can see on the internet, or if you happen to go to Italy and see it, I guess, is actually a photographic negative imagery of Jesus 3 days after he was crucified. And there are computer images that they've taken that negative and tried to recreate his face. And in fact, actually on every one of my videos in the introduction, there's 3 faces of Jesus. One is the Shroud of Turin, and then a mixture of the Shroud of Turin and the computer-generated version of what it thinks Jesus looked like to what the computer-generated version of Jesus. So anyway, take it for what it is. But in the future, apparently, Jesus will claim the Shroud of Turin as being real and authentic. Now, after he left the tomb, Maitreya was actually the one in Jesus' body speaking to the disciples and whoever was lucky enough to see Jesus. But Jesus went on an incarnation at that point. and then he spoke for however long he did, and then that was the end of it. Jesus himself was not out of incarnation for very long and reincarnated again as the Greek philosopher Apollonius of Tyana, or Apollonius of Tyana, however you want to pronounce it. And in fact, if you look up who and what Apollonius of Tyana was, the majority of what they talk about in Wikipedia, or even in when I looked him up in the Encyclopedia Britannica that I had at the time when I was young, they talked about this, is there's a great controversy among scholars and historians about who and what Apollonius of Tyana was. Was he just a Greek philosopher, or was he an elderly Jesus, meaning that Jesus did not die on the cross, escaped Palestine, left, went to Greece, and was under the pseudonym of this Apollonius of Tyana. But according to the Ageless Wisdom teachings, this was the next incarnation after Jesus for the master who was Jesus. And then he lived for a time and then came back again as a master. And I don't know how long he lived in that body, but the current vehicle for Jesus is about 650 years. He was born in the normal way, as any child would, regained full consciousness as a master at the age of 4, and since then has been one of the masters living in physical incarnation on this planet. And for hundreds and hundreds of years lived in and around kind of where Syria is. Now, to fast forward to today, or this time, Maitreya left his ancient retreat and entered London on July 19th, 1977. But there were 5 masters who actually 7, who preceded him to go into the modern world. They did it quietly without any fanfare. Nobody knew it happened, but it was quite an extraordinary event. One master, we don't know these masters' names yet, but one master left their ancient retreat that they've been living in for God knows how long, and went to the outskirts of New York, and has been living there since the mid-70s. And around that same time, another one went into London, and then slightly after that, another one went into Geneva. One went into this town in India called Darjeeling, which is another planetary center, and then the last one went into Tokyo. So for some time, those 5 masters were living, or since then have been living in those cities. And then there were 2 other ones that went into 2 other centers. The Master Jesus went into Rome, and another master went into Moscow. And then since then, other masters have entered cities. Not too many. There's only a few more that are living physically in a major city of some kind. But after Jesus entered Rome, and then the other one went into Moscow, then eventually Maitreya entered London and lived in the Asian community of London for as long as he's been living there. Jesus apparently has a tiny group of conscious disciples working in the Vatican as cardinals. They know of the Master Jesus, know who he is, are working with him and I don't know if Pope Francis knows about the Master, I'm sure, because he seems to be a lot more open than previous popes in my lifetime, like John Paul II, who apparently had heard about the Master Jesus living in Rome, but of course didn't believe anything of it. Anyway, in the coming time, not long after Maitreya is known for who he is, after the Day of Declaration, Maitreya will start to introduce these masters one by one. I would be quite disappointed and shocked, actually, if the Master Jesus isn't the first one that he introduces. But according to Benjamin Creme's own master, the Master Jesus has a huge job ahead of him, because his job is going to be to really head up the Christian churches and help clean up a lot of the dogma and distortions that are in the Bible, kind of eschew the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, when it comes to what was really said in the Bible, what's pertinent, what isn't, what was put in there by man to suit man's needs and needs to be taken out, those kind of things. And we'll really clean up the teachings of that the churches are putting out there today, and it will be much purer to what it was when Jesus was around 2,000 years ago. Of course, very much in line with what Maitreya talks about, because they're coming from the same source, which is truth. So, But anyway, the Master Jesus has a very, very prominent role to play in the future. Will be very well known, even, in the very immediate time, but let alone, hundreds and maybe thousands of years into the future. Of course, there will be a lot of people that are alive today who consider themselves devout Christians, evangelical Christians, that will see the Master Jesus as one of the many demons that's around the Antichrist, and will swear, that he's not who they believe in, that who they believe in is the real Jesus. This is not the real Jesus because he doesn't look anything like him and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, he's a master like anybody else, and he'll tell you that there is no true son of God. We're all sons of God. And so I'm going to basically stop my commentary about this painting and the Master Jesus and kind of segue it into one of Benjamin Creme's master's article entitled The Son of Man. I've read it a few times in some videos, and I think I could probably read it in nearly every video, and it would probably be the best article that I could read, because it really, from the minds of the masters, describes who and what the Son of Man is, who and what the Christ is. It also really ties the relationship between Christ and humanity, and it really sheds a light on really what that's about. I get a lot of commentary on my channel where people say, oh, you're worshiping a false god. I'm not worshiping Maitreya. Maitreya would never tell you to worship him. And this really is the reason why, is because Maitreya only sees us, he sees us all as one, all sharing the same divinity, all with the same divine potential, just it's the level of the manifestation of that divinity which really is the difference between us and a master. Jesus, when he's out known for who he is, will say the same thing, but hopefully that helps. Now, let's get on into it. Again, I always put this as a disclaimer. It's always better for you to read this on your own, and I know this article is actually up on the Share International website. I definitely recommend checking it out and reading it yourself, being able to internalize the words for yourself. It's far better than hearing me read it out. All right. This one was written in June of 1984. Many people await the return of the Christ with trepidation and fear. They sense that his appearance will promote great changes in all departments of life. His values, they rightly assume, will necessarily alter their ways of thinking and living, and they blanch at such a prospect. Besides, so mystical has been the view of the Christ presented down the centuries by the churches that many fear his judgment and omnipotent power. They await him as God come to punish the wicked and reward the faithful. It is sadly to be regretted that such a distorted vision of the Christ should so have permeated human consciousness. No such being exists. In order to understand the true nature of the Christ, it is necessary to see him as one among equal sons of God, each endowed with full divine potential, differing only in the degree of manifestation of that divinity. That he has achieved the fullness of that divinity is his glory, and well may we stand in reverence at this achievement. That this same achievement is rare indeed is also indisputably true. But the wonder of the Christ for men is that he was one of them. Not there is in the trials and sufferings of men, but he did know it. Each step of the path that men still tread has he painfully trodden. Nothing is there in the whole panorama of human experience that he has not shared. Thus truly is he the Son of Man. There can be little doubt that were he to appear unannounced in our midst, few would recognize him. So far from the general notion is he that he would pass unnoticed in the crowd. Thus it is today among his brothers as he awaits man's invitation to begin his mission. Many who see him daily know him not. Others recognize him but are afraid to speak. Still others wait and pray, hopeful that he may be the one for whom they dare not hope. Only his declaration before the world will establish him in the sight and hearts of men. While we await that day of days, let us clarify in our minds the reason for his return. Let us understand the nature of the task which he has set himself. To establish in our midst the fact of God has he come. To recreate the divine mysteries is he here. To teach men how to love and love again is he among us. To establish man's brotherhood does he walk the earth once more. To keep faith with the Father and with man does he accept this burden. To usher in the new age has he returned. To consolidate the treasures of the past, to inspire the marvels of the future, to glorify God and man, has he descended from his high mountain. Let us look at his priorities: the establishment of peace, the inauguration of the system of sharing, the removal of guilt and fear, the cleansing of the hearts and minds of men, the education of mankind in the laws of life and love, an introduction to the mysteries, the beautification of our cities, the removal of barriers to travel and interchanges of people, the creation of a pool of knowledge accessible to all. That such a task is not an easy one, not even for the Son of Man, is clear. Ancient habits of division and separation have strong roots, while fear and superstition cast their spell over millions of mankind. But never before in the history of the world has a teacher come better equipped for his task. Maitreya has come to do battle with ignorance and fear, division and want. His weapons are spiritual understanding, knowledge, and love. His shining armor is truth itself.
Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.